I saw him. He came in the building same time I did.
I didn't even open my email. Yeah. One of the rich. He did. Said Mr. Rubino would be here. Yeah.
Oh.
No, I thought that
Just make sure you
was like.
consider giving.
Oh, you said that, yeah. Yeah, no, I didn't do that.
Yes, sir.
Oh, Vern's across the hall.
Yes. Hi, Ms. Langford. Good. You and the. I hear not all county clerks are best friends these days. What's that? I said I hear that not every county clerk is your best friend. That's exactly where you hit the nail on the head.
Lights on.
And we'll see if Marilyn, whenever you're ready, we'll.
Live.
Oh.
All right. Good morning, Labor Health Committee. We are live. As many of you know, we're starting a little bit late today because of the governor's prayer breakfast. I sadly left 5 minutes early, but I beat the 500 cars in the parking lot. So we may have a couple people coming in late. And I know there are 2 people across the hall presenting bills. With that, Marilyn, if you'll call the roll.
Good morning. Representative Chadwick.
Here.
Representative Clauston.
Excused.
Representative Hornock.
Here.
Representative O'Hearn.
Excused.
Representative Penn.
Here.
Representative Trujillo.
We're just going to leave it open because I haven't heard from her either way.
Okay. Representative Ward.
Here.
Representative Yin.
Here.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Here. All right, committee, today we have 2 bills in front of us. First up is Senate File 65, the compensation of local registrars repeal. And to join us, a familiar face,
Again,
Senator Baldwin. Welcome back to Labor, Health and Social Services.
thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's so good to be here across the hall. Following me, I'll send somebody else from my committee over here to present to you. The bill that I present to you today is really straightforward and simple. I got brought a little bit late in the interim session, thus it's an individual bill rather than a committee bill. What this bill does is straightforward and simple. If you've had time to look in 35-1-408, it's an old statute that dealt with paying for registration of death records. As you all know, and you're well aware, as time goes on, this has shifted away from paper and pen and pencil to online, to digital. And that's what this deals with. It's a statute that we no longer need. It's a statute that's outdated and archaic, and all we're doing with this bill is simply deleting that or repealing that statute. Then the registrars can give you a little bit more information than that, but that's pretty much the ins and outs of the bill. We've got something that's in statute that we can take out, which is unusual. We have something that costs no money. We're going to make the green books a little bit smaller. So it's pretty much a win-win and straightforward. I would answer any questions.
Questions for Senator Baldwin, Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What again was the motivation behind this? A constituent wanted this?
This
Go ahead,
is,
Senator Baldwin.
oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. This is a statute that's just, they're not using anymore. And they can tell you the exact amount. Some years it was amounted to 50 cents. It was actually costing more to send out the payment and to process the registration than it was to actually, all this is done digital now. And as you'll hear, it's done as a part of a lot of these people that are doing these registrations online that takes, they can tell you, but it takes just a matter of minutes. It's actually being done as a part of another job that they have, so they can't be paid anyway. They work in the clerk's office or whatever that may be. So this statute was just, it's archaic. They're just not being used anymore.
So they're not following the law of paying 50 cents per month?
They are.
They are, okay.
But as they'll tell you, it's amounted to a very minuscule amount of money over the years. So.
All right. Other questions for Senator Baldwin? Seeing none. And if you're welcome to stay with us, if you need to go back to your committee. Okay. With that, any agencies? Mr. Bedoin, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Guy Bedoin, Deputy State Registrar for the State of Wyoming's Vital Records. Broke my name tape today, so first name's Guy, that's easiest. The last name's Bedoin, that's difficult. So with that, I think if I may, Mr. Chairman, just a quick overview of the registration process, and then get maybe to even follow up with Senator Baldwin's notes to Representative Ward on really what it is this bill is doing, if I may. So I have in my hand, these are birth registration forms that were given to hospitals years ago. So the birth clerk would have these in their office. The funeral homes would have a stack of something that looked like this, a death certificate. Each of the funeral homes and the coroners would have those documents. When an event happened, they had 10 days to file this with the local registrar for birth and 3 days to file this with the local registrar for death. They would go in and they would fill the paperwork out. They would complete the top portion of the birth worksheet. They would tear it out. They would take it to the local registrar, who primarily at that time was a county employee, and the county employee would review the documentation, sign off on it, and then send it to the state. So if there wasn't a county official that would do that, it would be a local individual appointed by my office to take that task on. So we created in the state 23 registration districts, which are each of the counties right now. Each of those individuals was appointed in writing, and we would ask them to carry out this task, and then we would pay them for their postage also. In this case today, this is all done electronically. So the birth clerk at the facility, and we even have it available for midwives. So if we have a nurse practitioner that's a certified nurse midwife that has a business that goes to a home, they'll actually log into our system now. They'll complete the registration process. And instead of sending it to a local registrar, they'll sign off themselves, or we'll have the public health nurse in that district will actually review that document and sign off on it. So it really takes just a second for them to fill it out. There's really more time spent by my staff putting together the 5,600 to 5,900 of these, to consolidate them, to send it out to each clerk, to let the clerks know who's entitled to compensation. And then we send them the name, and then we send the individual a name too. So I have one employee who probably spends about 3.5, maybe even 4 weeks putting this together annually to get it out to all the clerks. And oftentimes the clerks will call back to us and say, what's this for again? And we'll let them know that it's a statutory requirement for compensation. And I don't know that they get many people who actually request the 50 cents. There have been some birth clerks who have requested compensation, maybe upwards to $75 to $100 over a period of a year for the bigger facilities like Natrona County or here in Laramie County. So with that, we can work with this easily. It'll save some of my staff time, and I'll stand for any questions then, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Questions from the committee? Representative Hornock.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Are we doing away with the paper right now and just going to electronic, or will there still be paper copies available?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Hornock, in 2015, we transitioned to an all electronic system for birth, stillbirth, and for death. It's still an option in the event somebody needed to fill out paper, but we have not filed a paper birth or death certificate since 2015. So we'll always keep that open. We don't know if there's going to be some type of a catastrophic emergency where maybe the electronic systems were rendered or we're incapable of using them. So we'll always keep the paper there. I think we would probably have a coroner in the event of a death event like that, where the coroner would sign as a local registrar.
Okay,
Mr.
other
Chairman.
questions? I have a one for you. What is it in 35-1404? You're still required to provide necessary postage. Any thoughts on if I amend that into this bill that you no longer have to provide your local officials with necessary postage? Is that a completely separate area when you talk to your county clerks, or is that intertwined with this statute?
Mr. Chairman, we do provide the county clerks they still do marriages. And some of those marriage documents, use Laramie County as an example. The original certificates that are completed by them, they will package those up and send them to us. And they haven't ever asked for compensation, but the law does allow for us to provide them compensation. So if we were to remove that, it wouldn't hurt my feelings. We do about $400 a month in postage just from our office, which isn't much, but we do have to budget for it then as well. So that being said, we could work with that also.
Other questions? Representative Hornock.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Where does your budget come from?
Mr. Chairman.
Say us, but go ahead, or Mr. Bedoin.
Representative Harnack, it's a general fund and other funds. So primarily, we have about a $1.9 million operating budget. The majority of that is 100 series funds that pays for personnel. Again, the majority is from the general fund. Our office does contribute close to $600,000 a year to the Children's Trust. And recently we started putting money into an indigent burial fund too, which is upwards to $200,000 to $300,000 a year as well. So we put as much money back into the general fund as what we use for compensating our employees. So I hope that answers your question to the extent. General fund is primarily it though.
And I did forget you're a new face to this committee. And so maybe if you have a couple of minutes, could you just go over what vital records that you're housed in the Department of Health and kind of what your mission, what your goal is as you are part of the Labor, Health and Social Service family?
Yes, thank you. Did you say you?
Maybe the broad overview of what your department is in charge of and where you fit in the Department of Health and how much
Yes, sir.
revenue you bring in and kind of what your function is.
Sure. So, Mr. Chairman, our office does the registration of birth, death, marriage, divorce, stillbirths. We also do adoptions. I have 10 employees. That includes myself, three certification clerks. Those are the individuals that actually do take the paper applications. We still take paper today for people who are requesting birth, death, marriage, and divorce certificates. And we have an online service too. So 3 clerks process those orders. I have 2 registration clerks. Those clerks do, one does marriage and all corrections. The other one does divorce, marriage, and death. So they review those documents. I have 2 folks that are looking for certification as clinical coders. So they assign an ICD code, a code that is for talks about disease and death, or it describes conditions or disease that individuals might have. And then I have a statistician who puts together these wonderful notes for us. And then we share that data with our epidemiologists over in the public health side. And we have a systems manager. So we're one of right now 2 jurisdictions. There's 57 jurisdictions, states and territories who participate in the vital record system. We're one of 2 that have a single system that does all of our vital records. That was developed in-house in 2007 and implemented in 2009. And then I have an administrative individual that contacts our doctors and certifiers for death certificates. So when an individual passes in a facility or at home, a funeral home will take custody of the body. They will register that document in our system. And then we have to have a mechanism to notify the provider. So if that practitioner was the one that was the primary care provider or was there at the time when the death occurred, we have to have somebody who lets them know that they have to sign that certificate. So that's done electronically right now too. So that system manager and that administrative person take care of contacting those individuals. Kind of a feather in our cap, their Public Health Accreditation Board is a board that accredits public health entities. Our office was the 4th jurisdiction in the United States to be accredited through FAB. And really, I'd like to say that we have some very good processes and policy in place that help us do our job and provide a service to the registrants here in the state. So that kind of in a nutshell, Mr. Chairman, is Vital Records.
Appreciate it. Representative Ward, question? No. Yeah. I forget sometimes, that so many state employees and functions and divisions that Yeah, I should get an org chart for the committee with everyone and where you all are. Other questions? Thank you much. Clerks? Welcome, Ms. Langford.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee. I'm Mary Langford, and I have the honor of representing the county clerks of Wyoming. And we had approached Senate Labor to bring this bill, which they graciously did. And we appreciate our sponsors that sponsored the bill for us. As you've been told, statute 35-1-408 is archaic. These filings are all done electronically by our offices. Where the county clerk kind of gets involved in this is the 50-cent payments when they generate the billing for these and make those payments. It's something that's been budgeted in the past. A lot of the clerks say, we don't have anybody that claims that. Why are we budgeting money for something that we aren't paying? Because the key part is that there isn't any compensation that's paid for anyone in this section that are any full-time or state, local unit government employees. So if they're already an employee of the state or the county, they're not eligible for this 50-cent a document payment. So those were the reasons why we brought the bill forward, or we asked for the bill. And we would appreciate your support in that. And I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Questions for the county clerks? Representative Hornock.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just curious when the last time this 50 cents was paid out, if you know.
Ms. Langford, have you had any of your county clerks demanding 50-cent reimbursements?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, no. Yeah, there's, like I said, most of those folks are already doing some job related to that. So it's 2 signatures instead of just one on a document or something like that. They're a county health officer, they're a coroner, they're a state employee. So yeah, it's archaic.
Anyone
Thank
else?
you.
Seeing none. Anyone else here to testify on Senate File 65? Looking around, Ms. Bush. Friendly college students? No, not on this one? All right, no one online. I didn't open up my Zoom on this one yet. No one on Senate File 65? Not seeing any. All right, we'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Chadwick, seconded by Yin. Any amendments, committee? Discussion on the bill? Oh, as I said, there was another great piece of 35-1, I think it's 405 that has a postage requirement. But I can do that in there. It's a simple bill. It's white. It's nice to maybe not have any amendments from this committee on a bill from how it's been going lately. So any other discussion on the bill? Seeing none and question being called. If you call the roll, Marilyn, on Senate File 65.
Representative Chadwick.
Aye.
Representative Costin, I vote absentee. Representative Hornock.
Aye.
Representative Hearn, I vote absentee. Representative Penn.
Aye.
Representative Trujillo.
Aye.
Representative Ward.
Aye.
Representative Yin. Chairman Swanitzer. Thank you. Vote passes. 9 ayes.
All right, we're gonna give it about, take a 2-minute break and grab the good Senate co-sponsor of Senate File 131. Or yeah, Ms. Sharp, if you go do that. Committee, hang tight, get a cup of coffee, and we'll reconvene about 9:10.
If there's coffee.
Couldn't figure out if it- Yeah, it's all. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Yeah, I don't like that. So Dwight, are you ready? Just want to hang back there?
All right, committee, welcome back. Our next bill this morning is Senate File 131. Let me double check that. 131, prohibition on delivery of unsolicited ballot forms. Joining us is the prime sponsor of the bill, Senator Hutchins. Welcome to House Labor, Health. and
Well,
Legal
thank
Services.
you.
Floor
I
is yours.
appreciate it. We're just over there. You got seated before I got seated. This isn't a complicated bill, but we think it's an important bill. This summer during campaign season, we'll just jump right in. I've given you some exhibits and a possible amendment if you're agreeable to that. This summer, a mailer went out, and this is a time when most people are really sensitive about elections and election securities. And this mailer went out, and unfortunately, some people actually thought it was an actual a ballot request form, and they mailed them back in. Thank God the clerks saw the discrepancy and they just tossed them. But that's time and that's energy and that's effort. And then it's also sad that there were some people that actually thought this was a real form and sent them in. So we have no idea whether they went out to vote, whether they're still sitting there waiting for their absentee ballot form or not. All right. So with that, I'll go through the bill real quickly. On page 1, we have the act on lines 1 through 3. Prohibiting a person from distributing unsolicited absentee ballot request forms to any qualified elector and providing for an effective date. Down below on page 1, 12 through 14, on to page 2, 1 through 2, that's where we'd like to make a change. A change was made in committee on the Senate side that made a slight change, but we didn't have time to make the change you see in front of you. So with that, that is pretty much the bill, that unless requested to do so, this is what we'd like this bill to say. No person except a county clerk or a secretary of state shall distribute an absentee ballot request form by mail, email, or any other means to any qualified elector unless that qualified elector specifically solicited an absentee ballot request form. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll sit for questions and hope I can do justice.
Okay, questions for Senator Hutchins? Rip in a pen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, it seems to me like this amendment is more of just a clearing up confusing language. Would you agree?
Yes, ma'am, that's Mr. Chair, that's exactly what the amendment is trying to do. Just make it clear, concise. This is exactly what we want to do and move forward.
Okay, other questions? Rip and Vivian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I guess I'm just a little confused. Why wouldn't we want more people to be able to access absentee ballots by having that form in front of them, even if they don't request it?
Senator Hutchins, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, if I get you right, we want everybody that's of legal age and sound mind to be able to vote. But if I don't request an absentee ballot request form, then no one should bring me one. It should be my choice to get it, not have someone send it to me. If that answers your question.
Follow-up, Representative Vivian.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, thank you, Senator. So what if I really wanted to distribute these forms and then I sent out a form to people that said, would you like me to send you an absentee ballot request form? And then they check it off and they send it to me and they say, yes, with this language, would I be able to send them an absentee ballot request form?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yen, no. You have to personally request that ballot, not have a group of people coming in. Just for instance, you may have somebody think it's a great idea to go into a nursing home and just start talking to everybody in there and say, hey, we'll give you ballots if you need them. No, they need to request those ballot forms personally. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Chadwick, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as I'm reading here at the bottom of page 1, is it's referring to accept a county clerk or secretary of state. Should that include or their designee? Would that be an issue, or should that be included perhaps in an amendment?
Senator Hutchins, if you want that, or we can certainly ask the county clerks in the Secretary of State's office, but go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was brought up. And this is specifically saying, no, we don't want that. And the county clerk, if she doesn't mind, she can come up and answer that question as well. She's been kind of tag teaming with me. If she'd like to, and the chairman's agreeable, she can answer that.
We'll get her up in just a second. Any other questions? Senator Hutchins first. Representative Hornak, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in 22-9-104, I think it is C. It says request for a ballot may be made on behalf of an absentee qualified elector if the prescribed information is furnished. So there's some information required there. It sounds to me in that statute, and correct me if
Reference.
I'm wrong, but that somebody can request an absentee ballot for somebody else if they provide the required information. Does this conflict with that?
Senator Hutchins, if you know.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Hornock, that particular instance did come up where a spouse may be able to request a form for their spouse, and then that form would come to the house and then they could fill it out. But I think that did come up. I'm not certain if the Secretary of State's office has more information on that, but that did come up. And I don't think it conflicts. Thank you.
And I think it reads, they have to know all the information, which is kind of scary, but the information's the full name, optional social security number, date of birth, and the address. And so I do think it would normally be a spouse, or if your kid is overseas or something, is why that's there. Also in D, no organization or person on behalf of an organization shall obtain an absentee ballot for an elector. So that's another qualifier in the statute. Any other questions for Senator Hutchins? Not seeing any right now, Senator, but please stick around and certainly can.
Thank you.
County clerks, you were referenced. I know the Secretary of State also would like to speak, but as you were asked for by Senator Hutchins, if you wouldn't mind coming up first, Ms. Langford, and taking that question. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Mary Langford and I represent the County Clerks Association. Tell me the question again.
Do you want to repeat it, Representative Chadwick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the question was,
Designations.
at the bottom of page 1 on the engrossed version, it says, except a county clerk or secretary of state. Should that include or their designee or, you know, I know at least in our county, we have within the county clerk's office an election clerk. And certainly she would be capable of doing something like this.
Ms. Langford, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Chadwick, I believe that county clerk or secretary of state includes their office, their staff, as opposed to being specifically the county clerk having to do that work. I'm sure the Secretary of State's policy person is here. It could be able to respond to that, but I would understand that to mean my office, my position, but also my staff, my election staff, to be able to administer that.
Okay. Go ahead, Representative Chad.
Just to follow up comment, I've just seen it in so many other bills where it does reference, the staff, and this one does not.
Mhm.
That was where my concern came from.
Okay. Thanks for that question. Maybe Ms. Langford, if you have thoughts on the bill in general while you're here, and then we can keep asking you questions.
Okay.
Go ahead.
County Clerks Association really has no position on this bill. There was a proposed amendment that you've seen that was put in. County clerks need to be able to deal with these ballot absentee ballot forms to be able to do maintenance on their voter list. That's the reason why we wanted to be included as being able to distribute ballot forms. And there, we do have some established absentee polling places. For instance, the folks that live in Yellowstone Park, their polling place is Cody, and you don't drive to Cody in November to vote. So a lot of times they solicit absentee ballots or absentee ballot requests from those residents that are in Mammoth and different places in the park. And there's a few other places that are a bit inaccessible. So there are polling places that's used for. And also during the pandemic, the Secretary of State's office sent out absentee ballot request forms to all the registered voters in the state so that they would be able to continue to participate in the election, even though there were restrictions on access and those types of things. So those are the two reasons why that we supported that amendment that was put in the House side or in the Senate side. And as I said, we support the bill and ready to stand for questions.
Other questions for the county clerks? Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Langford, do you know if there are any other forms that we prohibit other people from sharing from the county clerk's office?
Ms. Langford, if you know.
Ooh. Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware of any, Representative.
Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This references email and other means. Right now, other than walking into your office, how does somebody, is there a form online that they can go to fill out? What forms do the requests come in currently? What form is that?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, when a person requests an absentee ballot, it's usually over the phone, by email. They may come into the office. They will fill out this form. In the office, if you have somebody that calls, the staff people fill out the form so that they have a record of that absentee being requested. And they solicit the information that they need to deliver the absentee ballot. Typically, you don't request this form and walk away with it. You take care of it right there and you're delivered an absentee ballot if you're at the counter. And what's happened in the past, and I think what precipitated this legislation is that candidates, parties, PACs have sent out this absentee ballot request form as part of their campaign material. And it's confusing because we have folks that are always absentee voters. We have an absentee list that's updated every year with, do you still want to be an absentee voter? Where's the address you'd like your ballot sent to? That type of thing. So those ballots are ready to go when it's time to send ballots out. And then this comes along and people are going, geez, I thought I already had an absentee ballot, or I already have an absentee ballot. Now I have this, I'm confused, what's going on, that type of thing. So it's been confusing in the past, and it's been done for quite a while. I mean, it was done in the last election cycle, but it's been done for over a number of years where people were trying to get folks out to vote, of course, but people were encouraging folks to consider absentee voting. And this is all you have to do to get an absentee ballot is send this in. And so it's confusing for the voters as well as for the clerk's office too.
So, Representative Hornet, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in your opinion, for an individual, it's a fairly easy process to get an absentee ballot if they want one.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, yes, it is.
Okay, other questions? Yeah, Representative Yen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Langford, so do you think, I think from the good bringer of the bill, they said that there was some confusion as well as thinking that it was an actual ballot. Do you think it would be a good idea to also prevent people from sending out forms that look like that they are actual ballots as well?
Ms. Langford.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yen, yeah, I believe so. And that's another advertising technique.
So, Ms. Langford, I do have a question on penalties. So when you look at the amendments from the other body that came over, there was a misdemeanor penalty in the bill originally. With that gone now, if someone were to violate this section, would it fall under like a general misdemeanor in campaign tactics as a campaign violation? Would it just be cause for civil action? What's the stick or the punishment if they do this as the bill's worded now?
Mr. Chairman, I believe there's a section in here that kind of is a catch-all for penalties, probably would fall into the standard campaign finance, yeah.
Other questions? Don't go too far, Ms. Langford.
Okay.
With
Thank you.
that, our Secretary of State is on Zoom, and I know Mr. Rubino is here as well, if you want to come forward.
Thanks.
Secretary, welcome. Floor is yours.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Let me know if I start having a latency, then I'll take the video off, but I think we're good with my internet speed. For the record, I'm Chuck Gray, the Wyoming Secretary of State. We also have our General Counsel Policy Director, Joe Rubino, and we stand in support of Senate File 131, which we view as about faith and confidence in our elections and addressing a problem that we've seen in the last few cycles where these unsolicited absentee ballot request forms have been sent out. And we would also support the tracked-in amendment that was distributed by Senator Hutchings. I would ask Mr. Rubino to hand out amendment number 2, which is sort of the version that is an amendment form to get to that tracked-in change, so that the bill would read, no person except the county clerk or the Secretary of State shall distribute an absentee ballot request form by mail, email, or any other means to any qualified elector unless that qualified elector specifically solicits an absentee ballot request form. So you have the tracked-in change. Amendment number 2 is the vehicle to which you get into that tracked-in change. We agree with the county clerks that this would fit into the catch-all penalty provision within Title 22. And I think I agree with the county clerks that the exception there would refer to the office and anybody that works within the office. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. we support Senate File 131. So.
Any follow-up to that, Mr. Rubino? So questions for the secretary, Representative Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify, and I've looked at it myself, I just want to confirm the amendment that you suggested is the same one that Senator Hutchings passed out.
Is that correct, Secretary Gray? Do you know?
Mr. Chairman, I was just coordinating with our general counsel, and he's in the room, and I believe that the answer to that is yes, just talking to him over, so I had him confirm that once that was handed out. That's the tracked in change. It's sometimes useful to see the tracked in change, but we also just wanted to hand out an amendment form because ultimately that's what you have to move. So.
Our secretary certainly appreciates that, but Mr. Rubino, that's correct. This is the same as the previously written version.
Mr. Chairman, yes, it is.
I get maybe a question, Mr. Rubino or clerks, when you come back up. When we say qualified elector, is that just standard language? I mean, how would someone know if that elector is or isn't qualified? They look 18, they look like a Wyoming resident. Any concern on that language on who is and who isn't a qualified elector and how we would know that?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that appears elsewhere in Title 22. And so it gets to the fact that it's the voter themselves requesting it for themselves.
And Mr. Chairman, could I weigh in on that really quick? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm 99.5% sure that that is defined at the top of Title 22.
All right. Other questions? Representative Yen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Secretary of State, and maybe Mr. Rubino, if you know. The same question that I asked Ms. Langford, are there any forms in the Secretary of State's office that we prohibit other organizations to hand out?
Mr. Rubino, if you know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Yin. I'm not sure I understand your question. Are you talking about forms in general, ballots? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Forms. So things like permits for businesses or licensing forms or any form that the Secretary of State accepts as a form that it lists on their website. Do we prohibit any third-party organization from giving those forms out? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You know.
Representative Yen. I can't think of one right now off the top of my head. The issue with this was really dealing with voter confidence and receiving unsolicited ballot request forms.
Other questions for the secretary?
Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, answer that. Not that I'm aware of, but this is one that we've identified an issue with. So.
Representative Klauston, and I'll go back to Representative Ward. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary or Mr. Rubino, at our last election, I heard from a lot of people working at the elections that people were bringing in what was really a fake ballot. It looked exactly like our real ballot with suggestions on how to vote, like it was marked. People brought them into the election with them, and the people working the election said it caused a lot of confusion and kind of decreased the confidence in the election as well. By taking out this line that says which claims to be in an official election document, do you see that maybe helping clean up that issue that we experienced?
Mr. Rubino, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Klauston, and I believe that the amendment, let's see, the amendment that was proposed takes that out. And so I don't know if this answers your question, but this really gets at the identified issue, which was the absentee ballot request form. And so I can't really speak to that hypothetical, but that's what this bill was getting at. And if you look at the title of the bill, I mean, that is what it's targeted at. But I understand your point.
Gonna go Rip.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I looked up Title 22 while I was sitting here. Just want to confirm with Mr. Rubino. It says on page 4, section XXBI, a qualified elector includes every citizen of the United States who is a bona fide resident of Wyoming, has registered to vote, and so on. No person is qualified elector who is currently adjudicated mentally incompetent person, and it goes on from there. So there is a paragraph identifying who a qualified elector is. Is that your understanding too?
Go ahead, Mr. Rubino.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ward, yes. And I got that as well.
Representative Chadwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I seem to be missing something here. On this amendment, page 1, line 12, it takes out unless requested to do so by a qualified elector. And then puts it right back in on page 2, line 2. After elector, insert, unless that qualified elector specifically solicits an absentee ballot request form. It just seems to take it out in one place, put it in, back in another. What am I missing?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr.
Representative Chadwick. Yeah, that's a great question. And really, when we were wordsmithing that, we worked with our Attorney General representative when we were originally going through that. The purpose of the amendment, as it was originally brought forth, was that it cleared up the language that was requested by the qualified elector. And so when we went through different versions of that, yes, it gets taken out in the first clause, but then it's put back in. That was more of a grammatical issue, but that's why it's put back in there. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, could I weigh in on? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The way it originally reads, basically any qualified elector could make the request. So Jill could tell the person who is going to put out the absentee ballot request form, do this for Jake. And that doesn't make sense with the intent of the bill. So the AG's office actually weighed in on this as well. And it's just better to put it in on the end and to say, unless requested by that specific qualified elector.
We're going to go back to Representative Ward. Do you have a follow-up? You're good. Representative Yen.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So I'm trying to parse this specifically solicits an absentee ballot request form. Does that prevent me from asking someone as not a designee of the county clerk if they want an absentee ballot request form and they say, yes, I can't give it to them still with that language? Is that correct?
Secretary, do you want to fill that one first?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, it says unless that qualified elector specifically solicits it. So if it's specifically solicited, then it would be able to be distributed. But what we're trying to get out here again is that mass mailer where, it's not being specifically solicited that we've seen in this last cycle. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Yen.
Let me follow up on that. So my sibling's leaving town, going to miss the election. I ask him, hey, you should probably get an absentee ballot request form. He has not asked me specifically for it. Would I be in violation of the law if I recommend to him or I show him on the print one off from the county clerk's website, right? Because you can request online. Apparently there's a QR code now, as seen from the photo that was sent out. Would I be in violation of encouraging somebody else to vote absentee if they're not specifically soliciting me to do that? I think, is that the question, Representative Yen, or that's my concern as well. Mr. Secretary, Mr. Rubino, thoughts on that? If I'd be in violation, if I'm not specifically soliciting, or that person's not specifically asking me for it, and I encourage them to vote absentee if I know they won't be here.
Can I add to that?
Please do.
Sir, on statute 22-9-104, to answer his question on letter D, it says no organization or person on behalf of an organization shall obtain an absentee ballot for an elector, right? So that kind of would fall into Joe Smith on the side of the street soliciting a ballot. Is that how that would go?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rubino, go. For it.
Representative Trujillo, those are great questions, and I believe Representative Hornock brought those up. That it's important not to conflate the existing statutes that deal with absentee ballots and those that deal with absentee ballot request forms. This deals with absentee ballot request forms. So the existing statute that you're referencing deals with absentee ballots. And so you can go through a process to have your designee and things like that. The absentee ballot request form, that's what this bill addresses. I hope that clears it up.
But for me, if I say, hey, I know you're going to be out of town, I really would like you to vote, even he's not in my district. If I gave him that absentee ballot request form, I'd be in violation if I try to encourage a friend of mine to vote who's not going to be in town that day under this new wording. Is that how you read it? I think
Mr.
that.
Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
Very great.
You know, in your hypothetical, I think the way I would interpret that hypothetical is it was requested by that person. I mean, you were in a conversation and they said, yeah, I'm gonna be out of town and I'd like to vote. And so then that person, Jake, or I forgot the name he used, supplied that form or showed him on a phone or whatever. I mean, I think that's the way I'd interpret that hypothetical.
Council, same way? Just making sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, and I think, the point we were getting at is that as it was originally written, anybody could request it for anybody because they're a qualified elector. So I'll just request it for a qualified elector. That's what this was getting at. But yeah.
Other questions, Secretary of State? Not seeing any right now. Don't go too far. Other people to testify for or against Senate File 131. Ms. Lowe, welcome. State your name for the record.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and esteemed committee members. My name is Jen Lowe. I am Executive Director at the Equality State Policy Center. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan that advocates for fair elections and transparent government right here in the Equality State. As the bill stands before you now, ESPC would have no position on this bill as it just prohibits people sending information that looks like an official election document, which from my understanding would hit the concerns that came to bear during the previous primary election when one of the candidates sent out an absentee ballot request form that looked like official mail. That is where the confusion came into play with this bill. As the amendment before you proposes, ESPC would be in opposition to this bill because it would prevent organizations like my own from educating voters on what options are available for them to participate with their franchise in full participation. We want people to vote. And if folks know that there's an option, then they may be more encouraged to vote by absentee ballot and participate in elections. If we're talking about unsolicited information coming to my mailbox, let's talk about campaign mail. That's not something I want, but it's something that comes to my box to educate me about the candidates and about the issues. The absentee ballot request form is not the same as an absentee ballot. This is just me or my organization letting someone know that this is an option for you to participate. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for being here, Ms. Lowe. How does this prevent you from educating voters?
Ms. Lowe,
Mr.
go
Chairman, Representative Ward, it would limit my ability to educate them on their access to an absentee ballot. It's one more tool in my box to let people know, hey, absentee voting is an option. If you're interested, here's a request form.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Lowe, but you can still say to your interested parties, here's how you request an absentee ballot request form, correct?
Ms. Lowe, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ward, my understanding of the bill with the amendment before you, no, I would no longer be allowed to suggest to someone an absentee ballot request form.
Okay. Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in our statutes on how to apply for an absentee, 229104, again, item C, it says request for a ballot may be made on behalf of an absentee qualified elector if the prescribed information is furnished. So, kind of a, if they know that type of information. So you then could go to the person and say, hey, I need this information, this information, this information. And then you still, the way I read that is you still could request, as long as you had that information for an individual, you still could request it. I guess I'm not, we're kind of drawing a line on who can request an absentee ballot, but I don't understand, I guess if you could explain how that limits your ability to educate people to go out and get one, or say, go to the county clerk's website, or, go to the county clerk's office. So I guess if you could explain how that limits your ability to educate people who might need this.
Ms. Lowe.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Hornock. I mean, we're talking about two different documents here, right? To actually request an absentee ballot, you have to be in person applying for the absentee ballot. And in fact, I think there's legislation right now that you would have to use a piece of ID to even get an absentee ballot. This is just a request form, right? This is just me saying, Representative Hornock, there's a pandemic going on right now. I know you might not be interested in leaving your house. Did you know that you can fill this out and get an absentee ballot? I think the problem that we're really kind of debating is in the election, the confusing mail looked like an official document, and that is problematic. And that is addressed in the statute that was passed through the Senate. What we're talking about now is, organizations like mine and others being unable to let people know that they can request an absentee ballot through the mail.
Yeah, follow up. So you said you need to be in person to request an absentee ballot. This actually talks about by mail, email, or any other means. And we heard from the county clerks that it's even possible to do it over the phone. And then in statute, it talks about if you call the county clerk, the clerk receives the information, they will reduce it to writing to get that ballot. Could you kind of elaborate on that?
If you can, Ms. Lowe.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Hornock, I may have misspoke because you can apply for a absentee ballot through email or mail or by phone. You do have to be in person to register to vote. And like I mentioned, there is current legislation in the process that if you did come to apply for an absentee ballot in person, you would also be required to have an ID.
Okay, other questions for Ms. Lowe? Not seeing you right now, Jen?
Thank you for your time and for your service to the great state of Wyoming.
You as well. Other people here to testify, Mr. Winnie. Welcome, Bill.
Mr. Chairman. Bill Winnie, Sublette County. The federal postcard application is routinely used by military members. I voted that way, but for some 25 years. Curiously, Mary Langford was my county clerk, so she could follow my career around. But those forms require the signature of a commissioned officer or the personnel officer on a unit. And I understand the same form can be used by general civilians, say they're in Kathmandu or something, but require a signature of a consular officer. So those forms should satisfy what's in this bill. And subject to your questions, thank you very much.
Questions, committee? Mr. Winnie, let me ask one then. So under this proposed language, let's say you as a military officer said, hey, my unit from Wyoming is overseas. We're gonna not make the election. And you as the commanding officer tell them all they should request absentee ballot forms. Do you feel you'd be in violation? I'm not sure if that ever happens. Have you ever had it more in the military?
No, that is not routinely done. There is a person in any given unit designated as a voting officer. They have a book, all the states in it and all the various elections. So a military member can go to him and say, what's coming in my state in Wyoming? And then get the form and have it filled out. I have not seen anybody in the chain of command do what you just described.
Nobody has said, hey, let me order you an absentee ballot
No.
form. They would just encourage them to seek it out from their home state should they want to.
The voting officer job is what in the Navy we call an SLJO job. Figure in the S, but little jobs officer.
Representative Yen.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Winnie, can you help me describe like what is in that book? Does it actually have the absentee ballot request form in that book? Or does it just say, go to the county clerk's website and can you do that in a submarine to get the request form to actually do it? Or is the form in that book and then that officer has to give you that form? Tell me how that works.
Mr. Winnie.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yin, there's a federal postcard application that is widely distributed. It's fairly big, actually. It's not in the book. It's in a stack of papers somewhere in the unit. And you pick it up, fill it out, have it signed by, like I said, a commission officer, your personnel officer, and drop it in the mail.
Follow up?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So to follow up, would someone handing you that postcard form violate the statute?
In your mind, if you know, Mr. Winnie.
Mr. Chairman, that's a hypothetical. Normally what you have is they're sitting in a pile and you pick one up yourself.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Winnie. So would you be against the voting officer handing out to your sailors a form that says, hey, we're overseas. Here's how you get an absentee ballot?
Mr. Winnie, your thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, if they did that, it would be in general across all the states and whatever. And it would be like, I'm your voting officer. Here's the stack of federal postcard applications. And I can tell you when the various elections are coming up in your state. So if you got a question, come see me.
Any other questions, Mr. Winnie? Seeing none. Other people here to testify on Senate File 131? Not seeing any. Let me double check Zoom. Seeing none. All right, we'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure on Senate File 131? Moved by Ward, seconded by Penn. Any amendments or discussion, committee? Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the suggested amendment from the Secretary of State's office called Handout 2, entitled Alternative Proposed Amendment to Senate File Oath 131, and the Secretary has it.
Is there a second? Second by Penn. Discussion on the amendment. Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, so there are 2 out of 3 of the lines in the amendment I think I take issue with. Well, I mean, I guess because the third one is involved in the first one, I would take issue with the whole thing. I guess I'm confused because the intent of the bringer of the bill said that there was confusion of it being an official election document. And I don't know why we wouldn't want to just continue to say you shouldn't hand out forms that could be claiming to be an official election document. So I'm confused on why we would agree to strike that out.
Other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of that amendment, say aye. Opposed, say no.
No.
Let me see a show of hands. All in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. All opposed? 2, that amendment has failed. Other amendments in the bill? Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, on page 2, line 1, I'd actually strike out claims and replace it with can be reasonably confused.
So line 1, strike out claim. So it'd say which can be reasonably confused.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. That
Is
was my motion.
there a second? Second by Chadwick. Discussion. Maybe Representative Yin, if you could go a little more with what you're thinking.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so I think the issue that the bill seems to be trying to solve is whether people who are campaigning can send out information where then you have constituents who don't have confidence because they're confused by the form that they're receiving, seeming to be an official election document. And I think there are issues in other parts of the state where that actually happened, and this can help clarify that those types of campaign documents that can be confusing to voters shouldn't also be allowed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Yin, I think you still have just the absentee ballot request form on page 1, line 14. So instead of it claiming can be reasonably confused, I think it's fine. I'm just not sure that meets what you just said with that other qualifying language on line 14 that I think Representative Klauston talked about earlier, that similar issue. So think about that for a second. Or Representative Yin, if you're ready now.
Mr. Chairman, then I would, I would alter my amendment if I can, and hopefully it'll be okay with the second. On page 1, line 14, after form, also insert or a form that could, or never mind. I'll withdraw the amendment. I'll think about it later. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. We only have about 2 minutes. I don't know if you want to think about it now or maybe on the floor if it gets out. Other discussion or amendments on the bill?
Mr. Chairman, I'll bring one more amendment.
Representative Yin.
Thank you. On page 1, line 13, after Secretary of State, add or their designee. On page 1, line 13, after Secretary of State, add or their designee.
Let me make sure you want that to go to the county clerk or the Secretary of State's designee.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm not sure how to parse it correctly, but I would like it to apply to both. So both the county clerk and Secretary of State can have designees that can do the distribution.
Okay, Marilyn Lilly, you have conceptually what the hope is. Is there a second to that? Seconded by O'Hearn. Further discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. That amendment is passed. Any other amendments on the bill? Seeing none and someone yelling the word question.
Question.
Question being called. Marilyn, if you'd call the roll on Senate File 131.
Representative Chadwick. Representative Costin,
No.
Representative Hornock,
Aye.
Representative O'Hearn,
No.
Representative Penn,
Aye.
Representative Trujillo,
Aye.
Representative Ward,
Aye.
Representative Yin.
No.
Chairman Zwanitzer. Are you sure? Okay,
Senator Hutchins, who's floor managing this in the House, if you know? You have 3 co-sponsors. Let me know at your convenience which one I should be talking to and making sure they're up. Sure. Okay, well, and one of us may as well. So if anybody in the panel wants to talk to whoever you'd like, just let me know at your convenience. All right, so. Okay, and we'll be singing the interim as well, because you're on Labor Health Social Services. All right, with that committee, we're adjourned for the day. We'll see you at 8 o'clock on Friday.